Maryland basketball will continue their momentum against USC.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And I'm also doing work at Inside Black and Gold. So make sure you guys head over to insideblackandgold.net for all your latest Terps news. Maryland basketball has a huge game tonight against USC, and I think that the Terps will continue their momentum by beating the USC Trojans. So another home game for Maryland basketball. I've grown to really enjoy these this year. Every game feels really exciting. Every game feels upbeat. Every game feels like we have a real opportunity to win. And I would argue almost every game feels like we should win that we play, especially at home. And it hasn't been like that in the past for Maryland basketball. It hasn't been like that over the past couple of years for Maryland basketball. But this year has brought into a new light of really being able to win and really being able to feel. You get that feeling every single game that Maryland should win, and that's not how the team's been. That's not how the team was last year. You have to go back a good couple of years. Even when we made the tournament 2 years ago, it didn't feel like quite the same. Like this year, it feels like every time we go out, it feels like we almost have the better team, which is a really good feeling. And I think right now we absolutely have all the momentum in the world. I think the Terps have so much momentum right now, and I think they're doing things that Maryland that we didn't know Maryland basketball was going to be able to do this year. And we've hit a high, I think, over the last 10, 11 games where we've been about as good as anybody in the Big Ten and as good as really anybody in the country. And we have a momentum right now, and we have a swagger about ourselves that we just haven't played with very much. I haven't seen Maryland basketball play with in a long time, but it's absolutely been coming out over the last couple of games. And we just have momentum right now. And I think we're really climbing a mountain. We're continuing to climbing and getting to a really good spot. If you look at it, 1, 2, 3 wins in a row right now, a 3-game win streak against lesser opponents, teams that aren't great. Had that bad loss against Ohio State, a game we should have won. And then you won before that. You won 4 in a row. Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, Nebraska won all 4 of those in a row. So you've hit a win streak if you're the Terps that has really put yourselves in position to be a really good team. You've won a lot of games over your last month or so, and I think that the Terps have hit a new momentum that we didn't see coming, that we didn't know this team had before the season. Some people thought we would have the potential maybe to get to be a top 20 team in the country and have the chance and opportunity to climb again in next week's ranking if you hop ahead of USC. But I think a lot of people didn't think it was going to be this. And I think the Terps tonight at 8:30 on FS1, Fox Sports 1, if you're curious about the channel, the Terps will continue their momentum against a solid USC team, a USC team that definitely isn't great. I would say they're kind of middle-ish in the Big Ten, a little below average in the Big Ten. I will give them credit. They have had a couple of big wins this year and have beaten some pretty good teams, but they've also taken some bad losses as well. And it's a USC team that isn't great, ranked 10th in the Big Ten currently, and have a lot of work to do if they want to be able to beat a Maryland team. But I think it's an interesting type of matchup between the two schools at 8:30. But I think Maryland will continue the momentum. I think Maryland's a better team. You look at USC, they're 14-11, but they just lost 69-66 to Minnesota. They just haven't been great recently, and I think Maryland's the better team here. And I think at home, especially, we see a new Maryland team come out, and I think a team that, especially when Maryland's more talented than a team, I think it really allows Maryland to be able to get a new momentum and be able to win games. But when you look at this USC team, They're better than you think. I think Maryland will continue their momentum, but I do think they're better than you think, and I think it could end up being a closer game than a lot of people think. I think when I look at the USC team, I just don't think they're as talented as us. I don't think they're as put together as us. I think they have guys that can score the ball and do some things offensively, but I just don't think they're great overall, and it's a big reason why I think that the Maryland Terrapins will continue their momentum against the USC Trojans, because right now, Maryland, we're about as hot as anybody in the Big Ten right now, winning 3 straight. Everybody's clicking. If we go off the last game against Iowa, all 5 starters are doing special things for the Terps. We don't have a weakness right now in our starting lineup. We don't have much of a weakness on the team. You could argue the bench, but I just think Maryland's cooking to a degree right now that is just too high of a level for USC to be able to not comprehend, but too big of a challenge for the Trojans. And then also, I want to continue on that home part of it. USC, they have to come all the way from California, from Southern California. That's a far trip. And when you look at things and where USC season is headed, they're going to be, they should be in the Big Ten tournament unless they have like some crazy collapse at the end of the season, but they should be a Big Ten tournament team. You got to remember with the expanded Big Ten that teams don't have to make it. I think it's the bottom 3 teams don't make it. So you do have to make sure you're not in that, but they should end up being in the Big Ten tournament and everything. But they're probably not a March Madness team. They're probably not a team that's going to make the tournament. And I just think there's not a ton of momentum right now with USC, especially coming off that bad loss against Minnesota. I don't think they have a ton of momentum right now. I think the highlight of their season was beating Michigan State. And if Maryland's not careful, that can turn into a Maryland team. And that could be another ranked win for USC. But they're inconsistent this year. Sometimes they show flashes of being really solid. Sometimes they show flashes of being pretty bad. So you just don't really know what you're going to get from this USC team, which is fair. You can't really figure them out. You don't really know exactly how they're going to play. But with this Maryland team, I think we found a consistency and a momentum that I feel pretty good that Maryland will continue winning against USC. We'll talk more about the matchups, who will guard who's important to stop, what are the key statistics in this game. We'll talk about that next. Attention Locked On Terps fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happen under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athlete they love. Now with Roy, you get to be part of the change and support. You can support Maryland athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player you want to support, decide how much to contribute, and receive exclusive content from the athletes you back. The best part, if your player transfers, you get your money back. It's risk-free and a way of showing your support. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team in the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now in the App Store and start backing up Maryland athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now, downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. So let's talk about some of the matchups of the game. This is what I'm excited to talk about this, because I do think USC has some guys. I do think they have some players that are good. And when I look at them, I think the biggest weakness and the biggest thing Maryland should look to exploit against this USC team, they're not that great defensively. They allow 72.9 points per game. They're just not that great defensively. When I look at what they do and when I look at how many points teams have scored against them, better offensive teams can score on these guys. USC's weakness isn't offensively. This year, they've just been bad defensively in a lot of spots that has allowed them to lose a lot of different games this year so far. Like, they allowed Michigan to score 85, Indiana to score 82, Iowa team that Maryland just beat 100-75, scored 90 points nearly against them. They let Indiana, a team that's been unorganized, not great all year, 82 points. They let UCLA get 82. They let Purdue get 90. Like, they've been allowing a lot of teams to score the ball. And when I look at Maryland, I think one of the biggest strengths of Maryland's team so far this year is the balance that they have right now. And Maryland team has a ton of balance right now. There's balance in the starting lineup for the Terps, obviously, which is really big and an important part of Maryland. And there's also balance with Maryland in terms of their offensive versus defensive efficiency. And the USC team isn't that balanced. They do some things well offensively, but defensively, they just aren't that great. So I think that's something that Maryland can take advantage of. I think Derek Queen, I think Julian Reese, I think Gillespie, Rice, all the guys, we should be able to score at them at a pretty good rate against USC. I think when I look at actual players, they do have a couple of guys that I think are really good. Desmond Claude, the junior guard, 6'6". He's a transfer from Xavier. He does a lot for this USC team. He's a really high-end player for them. He's a 4.4 assist guy, but he averages 16 points per game. Like I said, he's 6'6", so he is a pretty big size guard. And if we're not careful, he can have a really big game against us. And I think he's a guy that we have to play well against because if he goes off, then that USC team's going to get momentum. That USC team's going to look a lot better than you would think they are. So he's a guy that we absolutely want to limit. He's a guy that you don't want to let go crazy. He's a guy that I think is solid. I don't think he's quite as good as Gillespie. I don't even know if he's quite as good as Rodney Rice, but he is a guy that does a lot for the USC team. And I think he's their best player so far this year. Shoots 34% from three-point arc, 16 points per game. But I think there's one thing that we can do. He averages 3.5 turnovers a game. I do think the Terps can turn him over a good bit. And then their starting lineup's kind of similar to ours, where they have 5 guys that average double digits, and they don't have a ton of guys off the bench that are great. So I think that's another part of this game that's important is what starting 5 is going to get the most consistent performances from the player. That could very well be who wins the game, but also if anybody gets any bench presence, that could be a really big part of this game. I don't know what the status is with Kapari. I tried to look before. I don't know if he's completely back. I don't really know the deal with him, but I think it's something that matters. I would expect him to play and for him to be healthy. And I know he was sick and had some type of illness. I do think that he's our best guy off the bench. And if he can get something going off the bench, and whatever bench plays better could be a huge part of who wins the game today. And I think that that's something to consider for Maryland is USC's bench versus Maryland's bench, because both starting 5s are really balanced and are really talented, but whose bench could get a little bit better production, because that could be something to give both teams some relief so far for the game later on. And then also, I think for Maryland, I think we should be able to out-rebound these guys. We nearly average 6 more rebounds per game than them. I think we're better up front for sure. I think they have some good guards that can compete with us, but I think in the front court, I think we're better than them. So I'm looking to Derek Queen and Julian Reese as 2 guys that probably should dominate today. When it's a Derek Queen, Julian Reese day, it's pretty obvious pretty early on when those 2 guys are going to do some big things. And I look at today as one of those days where Queen and Julian Reese potentially could dominate and look like the 2 best players on the court. I think that USC doesn't have a great front line. I think they're decent up there. I think they have decent players. They have Terrence Williams, who's actually a DMV guy, went to Gonzaga up there, but he's only played 7 games so far this year. He's been injured, so I don't know what the status with him is. And then they also have this kid, St. Thomas, who's 6'7", but they don't have like a huge kind of lineup down there. Like they don't have a bunch of huge guys down there that you feel like is scary. Like they play kid Rashawn Agee, who's 6'8". I just don't think they're the biggest team ever, and I think Reese and Queen should be able to dominate. Like I didn't see anyone in their starting lineup above 6'8". So I do think that's somewhere where Maryland can absolutely have an advantage over. They do play this Matt Nolan guy a lot, but he's more of a 3 than a 4, I think, and he's a guy that's only 6'6" as well. So I do think Maryland has a size advantage in this game. That's really important, and I'm going to be looking for the Terps to be able to take advantage of that. Let's get into a little bit of the spread. Maryland is favorites. How big the favorites are there? Can they cover that? We'll talk about that next. So let's talk about the spread. Maryland is 10.5-point favorites against USC at home. I'm going to say this. It's a tough number. 10.5 is tough. But I thought 10.5 was going to be tough against Iowa, and Maryland was able to cover it. I think when I look at it, I can kind of see Maryland kind of just blowing the doors off USC. I think just home Maryland is a different animal. It just is. Under Kevin Willard, it's just been a different animal, and teams haven't been able to check up with us when Maryland's at home. We play differently. We play at a higher level. We're a better team when we're at home. We have a higher ceiling when we're at home, and we're really able to blow teams out sometimes. Whereas when we're on the road, it's going to be a little bit more choppy. It's going to be a little bit harder. And when I look at this game and I look at the 10 points, I say, Maryland, I think is going to win this game by more than that. I do. I think the home thing is huge, as well as we're just in a really good spot. We're a really good basketball team. And sometimes it's as simple as that. If you have a really good basketball team versus another team that's pretty mediocre, sometimes it's that simple to say you just have better guys. Sometimes I come over here and overcomplicate it. We're better than USC. We're just better than them. So instead of wiggling around it and like giving you guys this and that, we are much better than USC. Like we're better this year. We're more complete. I think we're better coached. I think we have better talent across the board. I think they got some guys for sure, but I just think Maryland is better. And so when I look at this game, I think Maryland covers the 10. I think we're just clicking on a different kind of atmosphere that USC hasn't been able to click at. And it's going to be really tough for them to stay in the game against us. So I do think we cover the 10.5. Can I see this game being close? Absolutely. I can see this game being close. And this is my thing. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I think it'll be like a late game kind of cover for Maryland, where in the last couple minutes, Maryland goes on a little, they're up, let's say 6, 7, 8 at the end of the game with like 4 or 5 minutes left. And then they go on a little bit of a run to extend it and really put USC away. That's kind of how I see the game going for the Terps. And then as well as I think it'll be a high scoring kind of shoot the ball type of game. USC does a pretty good job shooting the ball. I didn't talk about it. They shoot the ball 36% from three. They do some good things, 48% from the field. They do some good things shooting the ball. So I do think they can score a little bit. And we know Maryland just put 100 against a bad Iowa defense. So we'll see exactly what happens with the bad USC defense. But Maryland's proven this year, it's not like last year where it seems like we got to play the best defense ever. We got to be the best defensive team in the country to win games. It's a little bit different this year where if we allow them, the USC, to score a little bit, we can get into a track meet. And Maryland can score a lot of points. We shoot the ball well. I expect our guard to shoot the ball well again at home. So that'll be interesting too. And then my last point, Rodney Rice called out the student section and said, you guys got to show up. It makes us better. And I'm interested to see, after a poor kind of performance, if you will, from the Maryland student section, I want to see what it looks like. Do more people actually show up? Is it better? I think that that's something that we got to see. And I think that's one of the underlining stories that a lot of guys are kind of interested in. Do the Maryland fans show up? Will they show up for this game? I think that's something that's important for the Terps, and I'm interested in seeing. That's all we have for today. Thank you guys for listening to Locked on Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you guys for listening to Locked on Terps.